Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about a multifaceted approach to security validation. Conceptually, I think it's something a lot of us are doing, CISOs, security leaders, security programs in general. But maybe we aren't fully tying together the activities that we do and thinking about them as a holistic function that's just as critical as daily security operations or network security. Now, thanks Amitai for the intro. You can read my bio online, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about myself. I hope that's okay. Suffice it to say that I've been around security since before firewalls were ubiquitous, which is a pretty long time. As a CISO, the question that really keeps me up at night is, are we ready? And what does it mean to be ready? Well, to start, I ask myself whether our security controls are working as designed from the day we deployed them and across every planned and unplanned change across a very complex, segmented, and hybrid cloud environment. Are they effective in a reality where attackers and threats are constantly appearing and continuously evolving? Do they protect us against real-life scenarios that we can test and validate continuously and automatically? And do they balance prevention, detection, and response to increase our overall readiness and resilience? We've all talked about layered defenses or defense in depth for years. We all know that there's no silver bullet and there's no control that is going to stop every attack every time. We've adapted and we've built programs that focus on preventing what we can, having near total visibility of our environments to detect what we couldn't prevent, partnering with intelligence providers to understand what we don't know, and developing our response muscles so we can respond to potential incidents quickly and effectively. But a modern defense in depth methodology is more than that, and you might even call it validation in depth, considering and testing the next possible moves of our adversaries across all of our security layers. Hope is not a strategy, and assumptions don't help a CISO like me sleep at night. You know, there's a great meme making the rounds this week that shows a to-do list for attackers, and it includes getting into your network and stealing your data, or maybe ransoming your machines, and a to-do list for defenders, which includes meetings, time tracking, more meetings, staying up to date on email, training, and oh yeah, preventing and detecting attacks. As defenders, we need to be consistently vigilant. We need to ensure that our controls are operating effectively, as designed, all the time. But that's difficult in an environment that is constantly changing. Business is not static. The IT environments that support business are not static. Every day there are changes being made, whether to enable new features or to troubleshoot problems. These changes can impact security, and we need ways to validate that our security posture hasn't been reduced. One of the ways that we do this is with penetration testing, but that usually happens once a year, maybe twice. What about all the days in between? This is where we have an opportunity to combine the vigilance of our security operations teams with internal and external testing capabilities that can collectively fill that gap. When we combine third-party penetration testing, internal red teaming, and automation, we can build a capability to continuously test our environment for weakness. And when we layer into that third-party compromise assessments, breach and attack simulation, and a unified asset inventory, we can build a continuous picture of our environment as being healthy. This is the type of approach that can keep our businesses protected day in and day out. Of course, to be complete, this approach must apply outside in as well as inside out across each of the various attack patterns that can affect a heterogeneous infrastructure. A long time ago, I learned that although we call it a security program, really it's a risk management program. Every day we're making decisions that evaluate risk, formally or informally, and we decide whether to implement controls to reduce the risk or to reduce the likelihood of a bad thing happening, or to reduce the impact of a negative outcome. Sometimes we can't find a way to reduce the risk enough, and we have to suggest an alternate approach. But we can only do this if we're seen as partners that are stronger together. And as we all know, partnership is built on trust. Our business partners, as well as our partners in other areas of the technology organization, need to trust us to act in their best interests as well as our own. There's also trust inside the security program. When we set up our security organization for continuous testing, we can use purple teaming to collaborate in real time. The red team tests for vulnerabilities, and the blue team confirms whether a detection is working, or creates new detections and then practices response. Purple teaming is a highly effective approach to identifying weaknesses and ensuring visibility and response capabilities are in place. When you can purple team on a continuous basis using third-party testing, internal red teams, and automated security validation, and when you can layer into that threat intelligence from a top-tier source, you can effectively test your environment and know whether the latest attacks would be successful, or if there's anything else you need to do to prevent or detect them. So we're back to the original question. Are we ready? I think to answer that, you have to start with the basics. Have you covered the basics, the must-dos? For the purposes of this discussion, I'm assuming that everyone has implemented two-factor authentication for web-based email and two-factor authentication for remote access to your environments. I'm assuming you've got procedures in place to prevent money from being wired to a fraudulent account. I'm assuming you've implemented modern endpoint prevention and that you have some way of tracking whether it's installed and operating in a healthy state on every one of your endpoints, et cetera, et cetera. So if you've done the fundamentals, you've probably also tested them. You've hired a third party to penetration test your organization, and maybe you've had some findings and fixed them. Now what? Are you ready to defend an attack? For how long? How do you know that the state you've attained once the penetration test is over is the state you'll maintain until the next attack, whether it's paid or unpaid? This is where validation in depth comes in, but really creating a continuous cycle of validation in depth. If you'll forgive the medical analogy for a minute, think about preventing skin cancer. How do you know you don't already have skin cancer? You go to the dermatologist and you get a full body scan. No skin cancer? Great. Now you want prevention. So you apply sunscreen and you go into the sun. If you don't burn, you're not likely to get skin cancer from that exposure. Great. If you do burn and you later see something strange appear, you probably go back to the dermatologist to get it checked out, right? This is the same approach that we're going to apply to continuous validation in depth. We pick a point in time and we start with a compromise assessment. We gather data from every endpoint and from the network, and we look for anomalies that could be indicators of attack or indicators of compromise. Didn't find any? Great. From this point forward, we'll focus on defending attacks and preventing compromise. But you don't want to sit around and wait for a real attacker to test you, do you? No, you want to test yourself. So you hire a third party to perform a penetration test. They didn't get in? Great. Now what? Can you afford to hire that third party again next week, next month? Probably not. So you need some additional support. Do you have internal resources that can test? Maybe. If you're lucky enough to have them, maybe your red team can test a few applications or a few locations. But the real force multiplier here is automation. In the same way that SOAR platforms made our security operations teams more efficient, so too can automated security validation tools make our testing programs more efficient. We can continuously test our environments for exploitable vulnerabilities, credential leakage, weak credentials, privilege escalation, and more. And we can identify those weaknesses and fix them as a routine course. And when we partner with our security operations team during that testing, we can exercise their ability to detect and respond to a successful attack, and we can elevate their capability as well. This is how we know we're ready for the real thing, not once a year, continuously. Of course, this isn't only an internal exercise. Outside in and inside out are two sides of the same security coin. Understanding your external attack surface is critical. Monitoring for new IPs, new services, new vulnerabilities. Ensuring that what's exposed to the internet is what you've protected, and monitoring that continuously is critically important. When I spoke earlier about the constantly changing IT environment, this is an area where it's most critical. new deployments, troubleshooting, and anything that changes your external exposure has to be continuously monitored and tested. And this includes knowing what you have exposed and whether those systems or products are vulnerable. But I think our most effective testing is what's done from the inside. In security, it's always been the M&M analogy that's the most popular. It's a hard outer shell with a soft center. That's a problem that hasn't gone away, despite being a very popular discussion for almost 20 years. And that's why continuous validation is important. We haven't been able to prevent everything, and we know that compromise is going to happen eventually. So how do we answer the question of what an attacker can do once inside our network? Well, again, we can hire a third-party penetration tester, hand them a laptop, and say, go. And they will probably find something which we will fix, and then they'll move on to the next project. But again, we live in a constantly changing IT environment, and the controls that we've implemented to prevent the worst types of scenarios, like a NotPetya worm encrypting systems in a matter of minutes, must be effective all the time. So we need automation, and we need to leverage technology to continuously test our internal environment. A healthy security program is built by integrating people, technology, and process as much as possible. It may be stating the obvious, but a culture of security is paramount. Security is everyone's responsibility, and awareness and education is a key component of readiness. Since we know we can't prevent everything, we need to enable our people to help us in any way they can. We need to teach them to report anything suspicious, like emails that might be the way an attacker gains the initial foothold. We can apply a continuous testing methodology here as well. Testing our people using the latest real-world scenarios enables us to continuously educate them as attackers change their techniques. Phishing, social engineering, links embedded in attachments, social media impersonation, these are all things that might be detected by technology and can definitely be detected by well-trained humans. And when they understand the process to report an issue and how an issue is investigated, they participate in defending the organization in a meaningful way. From a proactive standpoint, prevention of catastrophic scenarios is the goal, and validating those controls are effective whenever possible is critical. When prevention is not possible, pervasive real-time or near real-time visibility that enables accurate detection and rapid response is the next best thing. Combined with red teaming that assumes attacker positions both inside the network, assuming breach, and outside the network, third-party penetration tests, compromise assessments, and purple teaming to increase detections, we can know where we stand at any given moment, and we can take action to reduce risk on a continuous basis. Additionally, the security operations team needs the ability to report back to the business quickly on exposure and risk posture, especially against the backdrop of rising threats discovered in the wild. This allows the team to reduce friction with IT partners, not trying to boil the ocean to fix everything all the time, and always including the context and business prioritization as part of the discussion. So wrapping up, let's re-ask the question. Are we ready? Have we reduced risk enough to weather the storm? Are we reducing risk on a continuous basis? When you think about the approach that we've discussed here, I think we are. By combining all of the capabilities we have at our disposal, compromise assessments, third-party penetration tests, internal red team exercises, automated penetration testing, breach and attack simulation, and threat intelligence, both from our paid partners and in general from the world around us, I think we have created a cycle of continuous validation in depth that keeps us in a constant state of readiness. We can test real-world scenarios, we can examine controls we have implemented to prevent catastrophic incidents, and we can continuously understand our external and internal attack surfaces. And we can ensure that the constant changes that occur in support of daily business are not reducing our risk posture. I think we're as ready as we can be. Thanks.